All right. So we're back for episode 2 of 90% Mental. And it's been a little while since the last one. For those joining us, we are attempting to write a book on the mental aspects of mixed martial arts and all that means. The first episode, we actually made some progress. We decided instead of, organizing everything academically, which would be my instinct, in terms of techniques or some sort of systematic thing, we'd do it based on kind of like anecdote or cool fights or cool moments where we saw something psychological happen that was amazing, and that's pretty cool. But since then, we've been talking offline about maybe the thought process that goes into seeing things, to analyzing fights, to making predictions. You made a hell of a prediction recently with Holly Holm over Ronda Rousey. I had the same prediction, but I don't stake my reputation and put it in bright lights the day before the fight like you do. And so, that's something that I think we're going to talk a little bit about today.
Yeah, I don't know if this will give us anything concrete as far as writing our book idea, like last time did, but you never know. And I think even just chatting stuff out sometimes at least directs us in a certain way.
Yeah, I've been wanting to talk this one out because I'm realizing there's a lot implicit in the way that you and that I will sort of think about fights, the information we'll look at, how we'll use it. And so, yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to chatting and also getting your thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, it would have been great to get together more. That's entirely my fault. I've been structurally trying to find, because it's fun to hang out with you and it's fun to work on this, the way to structure this so we could do it almost weekly. And I think this is the Fight Network back here. I'm here. So I think if we do it from here, maybe we can make it almost weekly, but we'll work on that later. But yeah, it's interesting. The time we're taping this right now, Carlos Condit will be fighting Robbie-Lawler later tonight. And you look at that fight and you say, people say all the time, who's your pick for this? That's something that as a conversation pops up on Twitter or wherever a lot now. And sometimes I actually blocked somebody on Twitter. I don't know why. A guy who works writing in MMA, and he's a decent guy. But every time somebody asked me if what was my pick was, often I'll go into some details about how complex it is to make a pick. And this guy every single time was like, yeah, great pick, bro. Or, wow, that's a confident pick. And I realized he and I were not on the same page at all. To me, it takes a lot more confidence to say, I don't know. Because anybody who claims to be able to pick, now some people pick based on odds, they pick based on track records of fighters, they use MMA math, but the truth is the more that you know, the more questions that pop up. So the idea of being a predictor, a soothsayer or a seer or any of that stuff, I don't know that that's a real thing. But what we do is take as much information as we can possibly compile, and that gives you some facts, and it gives you some truths in a fight. And sometimes you see these specific moments where you see something big. And Holly and Ronda Rousey, there were some very, very, very big things that made it so that I felt, looking into it the day before it, I thought she could win it. After the weigh-ins, by the time we were doing our live show at 7 p.m., I was able to go on the air and say, look, this fight has all of the elements of this type of upset, this type of unexpected upset, and it's my belief that Holly Holm's going to win the fight.
Yeah, I know that I had a big mental block against saying that just because it was so hard to believe. So, I was sort of entrenched, Rousey always dominates no matter what the story is. Kat Zingano's so big, we'll should be able to handle her the same way, easy peasy. But, I know thinking weeks out, like Holly Holm's got some real, and I tend to think more about the mental things. She's got some real things in her favor. First of all, her game plan can just be her game plan. She doesn't have to change it. She just has to do her version of it better. Second, she's been on the bright lights. She's had I forget if it's 17 or 18 championships. So she's been there, done this. She's not going to have a good game plan, but then panic when it comes time to use it. She's going to implement it. She's going to do it well. Third, if you look at Ronda's previous fights, her strategy for closing the distance is kind of eating punches and grabbing you. And she's been hit in the face, by Miesha Tate and others, but survived it. And Holly Holm's an expert, maybe the world's women's expert at hitting you in the face and then angling away or maintaining that distance and not letting you. So I remember seeing these things potentially line up. Other people saw them too. And but still thinking, gosh, you know what? But even if Holm gets Rousey hurt, even if she's on the ground hurt, Rousey could still, armbar her. Rousey has so many opportunities to win, and she's Ronda Rousey and having trouble getting there. And I noticed in myself that I was getting used to the idea. So, a week out, I was like, Holly Holm will give her trouble, but probably won't win. Then a day or two before, I was, telling some friends, like, Ronda Rousey's going to get beat up, but she might win anyway. She's just going to get hit a lot and look different. And then, we exchanged some interesting Facebook messages, which I'm really curious to, talk about if we get a chance leading up to it before the weigh-in, saying that, I think Ronda Rousey's not seeming right mentally, or at least not as strong as she usually is. And so I noticed that I was getting used to the idea, and I wasn't, even though the data were pointing me to seeing things a certain way, it took me a while to just overcome my own mental barrier to picking against Rousey. And I'm wondering if some of these things were magnified on your end because you go out there, this is your reputation, this is your job, and you say it in bright lights. I say it in a tweet that, 100 people at most will see. And I'm curious if you've experienced some of the same, had some of the same mental experiences on your end coming to this conclusion.
It was similar. And the reason this one was interesting, is because there were some large things that you could see. So 4 weeks out, I was down in Vegas and in Dana White and Craig Borsari's office, and they offered me a job doing breakdowns for the UFC. And they said, your first one's going to be Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm. I shook their hand. I was very excited. I was excited about the changes and new opportunities and stuff. And I went home and I immediately started digging into it. I'm enthusiastic about analyzing all fights, and I'm enthusiastic about my job. But all of a sudden, this was my big first one for the UFC. So I started looking at it 4 weeks out, as analytically as humanly possible. And I broke it down into range in a way that, say, Condit versus Lawler, there's going to be games at all ranges. There's going to be angles at all ranges. There's going to be up and down at all ranges. And I see Condit being able to win certain ranges, but big adjustments, or I should say small adjustments, can be made and are always made by both guys. So it won't be cut and dried. Condit will win at distance, and Condit's elbowing and trapping game inside has been very good. It's not that cut and dried because with two little changes, Lawler and a movement of his feet, and they're so complicated that they can fix those things. But when we broke down Ronda and Holly, it became super cut and dried. Start with where Ronda's most dangerous. There's 4 ranges in combat, in mixed martial arts combat. 2 steps out, kicking range. The tight circle, which is kind of boxing range. The 4th one is the clinch. And in MMA, I call the one between boxing range and the clinch I call chest to chest, because clinching is a description of something that can happen at chest to chest and in the other range, the pocket. So 2 steps out, the tight circle, the pocket, and chest to chest. And Holly Holm, you start looking at it. At kicking distance, Ronda doesn't have much in the way of kicks. And she's never shown much, and part of her aggressive stance, heavy on the front leg, it just doesn't look like it's been something that she's been working on. So you give Holly 2 steps out, she's knocked out 5 chicks, and people would jokingly say, oh, some of them were soccer moms or whatever, but regardless, she kicks you in the head from 2 steps out, or she kicks you in the liver from 2 steps out, boom, you can be done. And you try to tell me I'm not buying any of that. Ronda's this brilliant boxer. Ronda's a good boxer. Ronda's done a ton of stuff on mitts. You learn to be good on mitts. That doesn't make you I don't care how talented, and she is talented, and how incredibly good she is at learning and her kinesthetic understanding and all this. You can't be as good a boxer as Holly Holm with a lifetime of boxing in that short time. She can't. So 2 steps out range.
Frankly, we even saw that against Betchko. Like, sure, Ronda got the knockout, but half her punches were off balance.
Yeah.
And some of them, especially the last one, was phenomenal, and you saw her talent come through. But you could see she wasn't.
Yeah. In that fight, that gets to something we'll talk about after, but it's like she overcame just by being Ronda. It's like, this woman doesn't belong in here with me. I'm going to stand in there and punch with her until she's unconscious, because I'm Ronda Rousey and I beat her. That element was in play, and that's always in play. So, and then you get into that pocket range, and although that's the range that Ronda uses to grab you and drag you in, she's also kneed people. She took out a Olympic silver medalist with knees to the body, so that's in
That was her
question.
first strike, her first finish by strikes.
Yeah, that's in question as to whether or not who that belongs to. But probably Holly. But Ronda will have the ability to get the chest to chest and the clinch, her overhook or whatever clinch from there. And then you have to assume that Ronda has inside. So how do you beat her? If you're in, and just the breakdowns I ended up making for the UFC, they used the 30-second probably as a test to kind of see how people responded to it. But my 2-minute broke these ranges down. So I've been deeply looking at it. And in particular, from the tight circle, she strikes to distance. And we've seen it in her other 2 fights. And when I built that breakdown, I looked at those fights over and over and over and over and over again. And everything that you needed to do against Ronda was being done. And probably because it was, these girls were lower level than her, and they were fighting 30-minute dress rehearsal for Rousey. When you strike, you get out to distance, you kick at distance. It's okay to kind of panic in chest to chest to get back out. If you're in the pocket, we'll strike to make that pocket dangerous, so she's upset or she's stressed out. And we work outside and we set up kicks. So it's all in play. She has the way to beat her. All the other things you mentioned, the coaching, her preparation, her big money, big pressure fights, all of those things, all good. So when I did the breakdown, I ended with, if she can strike out to distance and use her kicks, she can win this fight and shock the ball. And I was comfortable saying that. And then, like you said, we were chatting about it, and it's like, you see her on a talk show, and that self-talk is not the way it always has been. Her confidence is seeming to waver. Maybe it seems like it has. Does she look in as good a shape in, around here? All the other little elements, but she can win at distance. She can punch her way back out to kicking range. Ronda may not be. All of those things are great. And the reason you were hesitant, it's the same reason everybody was, is it's fucking Ronda Rousey. And Rousey will overcome. Demetrius Johnson will overcome. Chris Weidman, until the breaking point, was always able to overcome. And that ability to win is because you're Ronda Rousey. You have an extreme, unbreakable confidence and belief that if you can get in to the clinch, you're going to win this fight. And so then you're like, well, she could win this fight. And it was at the weigh-ins where all of a sudden it was obvious to me. It's like, this isn't Ronda Rousey. Holly Holm was calm. She big sistered her at the weigh-in. She freaked her out, and Ronda was freaking out. And what I took away from that, she also described in, well, I know what Holly's going to try to do. She's going to try to box her way out and kick me in the head. I don't know if she saw my breakdown. Probably. She probably saw most of those things, and other people were saying that kind of thing. It got in her mind, and somewhere in her mind, in the lead up, 2 weeks out, it's like, yeah, maybe I'm not working as hard as I normally do. Maybe I have too many distractions, but I'm Ronda Rousey. I'm going to win this fight. In a week out, it's like, it doesn't matter what she does. I'm going to win this fight. But by the time you're getting close to the weigh-ins, did we solve the problem of getting to the clinch? Did we solve the problem of trying to cut her off and cut off her footwork? While you're sitting there on the pads and you're doing it, and you're the leader, and you're saying to your coach, are we going to do it? And he's like, don't fucking worry about it. You get your hands on her, you'll rip this girl apart. But somewhere in Ronda's mind, she wasn't sure. And at the weigh-ins, she cracked. And it was at the weigh-ins I started saying, Holly's winning this fight. All of those other things were in play. The one reason you couldn't say she's going to win is the Ronda Rousey factor, the extreme confidence, the knowledge of your victory, the mental strength. And when that was gone, Holly Holm was winning the fight. That was it. And so it actually made my pick for the show. We make our little who are we choosing? And I have a Ronda, and I was already thinking leading up to it that I was going to discuss all the ways Holly could do it, but Ronda has that ability, that unbreakable mental strength, and she'll do it. I saw the weigh-ins. I immediately went to the graphics guys and I said, change my pick. And I don't usually bet on fighting, but I told friends of mine and people around me, I said, put money on this. She's going to win this fight. I know this girl's going to win this fight. And she won the fight. But it was the weigh-ins. It was the crack at the weigh-ins, screaming, freaking out, throwing a tantrum. I'll show you. None of it was real. The real Ronda is just like, it doesn't. I am so and we see it with McGregor, man. And I saw McGregor in Vegas.
Mhm.
and it is real. And people, other people talk about his confidence. Other people are talking about mental training. Rockhold is starting to move and think like him. There's a lot of people. As he told me, he believes he's changing the game. I think that's true too. If you can look at him and not understand the power of confidence and the power of focus, then you're not paying attention.
That was one of the most unreal interviews I've seen. The one you did with Conor. Was it the day before his fight? And I don't know what was coming out of him. I mean, because you could say it was confidence, but it was something more. It was something
He was visualizing.
other fighters.
Visualizing it. Yeah, he was really visualizing it. He's fascinating. The biggest thing, yeah, I guess since we worked the first time, we were talking. Both that Ronda fight and that Conor fight have taken place. Probably two of the most interesting mental, as well as Weidman and Rockhold, all of which are hugely mentally effective performances. And yeah, we haven't had a chance to talk about Ronda, what happens when the wheels fall off the truck mentally. And what causes that potentially is confidence has to be rooted in reality and evidence. And when McGregor is feeling great and performing great, he knows he's done the work. He knows without question that he's done the work. And that confidence comes from work. Dominic Cruz I interviewed down in Vegas, and he talked about that. He's like, confidence isn't something you pretend or you trick yourself into having. Confidence is something that's rooted in the knowledge that you've done everything you can do and it's real. And that's what McGregor has, and he understands that. And this whole movement thing is about opening up his body because his mind is actually able to express itself so freely. He needs a body free from binding and free from being prevented to move. But we're seeing giant changes in the mental game and its importance.
Yeah, it's exciting. There were two smaller mental pieces that really surprised me about the Rousey Holm fight. One of them was on Rousey's end. One of them was on Holm and her coach's end. The one on Rousey's end is I was stunned that she didn't have either a prepared or an improvised plan B for closing the distance. And I know that there's probably a million technical ways people could come up with, whether it's instead of her usual entry, she should shoot for a double, but I'm putting those aside. I mean, she could stick with her own strategy of walking forward and do something slightly different, like accelerate, stop, pause, and then go in again. I mean, it's something as basic as that would have made it harder for Holm to time her. Instead, she just went forward at the same pace every time. And I have to say that I'm just stunned because Rousey's actually shown good ability to see what people are doing mid-fight and adjust to it or even use it against them. There's been some really cool examples of that.
And Holm did that instead. And it was Holm doing it.
I just did not see that coming, that Rousey literally wouldn't even – it's not that I necessarily thought Rousey could find a different way that would work, but I mean, I feel like it's one of the most basic mental principles of athletic competition. If it doesn't work, try something different.
Yeah, and you know why that you don't have that basics is because it always works. If it always works, and it always works, and it's always worked, and it's never failed, then that's A and B. The day it fails is when you realize you don't have a B. The day that it fails is when you realize, I'm limited. You weren't limited. You were batting 1,000. You got what you wanted 100% of the time. So when that failed, the whole wheels fall off it. And she got it when she needed it just by wanting it more and being sure she was going to get it. And you can't stop me. You cannot stop me. And so one day you stop me, and now, oh my God, maybe I'm not the best in the world. Oh my God, maybe I don't. But somewhere in that freak out, the day of the weigh-ins, I felt like and even that time sitting on Jimmy Fallon or Kimmel or whoever it was and saying, she's going to try this, but she's going to try to kick me in the head and knock me out. She knew that she needed to solve that problem. And the day of the weigh-ins, she still wasn't sure she had solved it. And that's why she cracked. And it wasn't a little crack. Like the door didn't just open a bit. It flung open with her screaming, and that's where you knew she didn't have what she needed to have for this fight.
Although, like you said, there were signs of it earlier. I mean, I remember sending you, I think it was on Facebook or something, a message maybe it was the day before. And I was almost embarrassed to send it. I thought you were going to be like, oh, that's really cute that you're thinking all these psychological things, mentioning things, how she's she'll saying things like, I'm getting all this attention. I hope that I'm worthy of it. Talking about a little bit more with a little bit more immediacy, how she's not going to be doing this too long. She sounded a little like Anderson Silva did before losing to Weidman. And I remember I was like, I got to share this, but I think he's going to say I'm crazy. And you wrote back, you're like, yeah, I'm seeing the same thing. And I was like, wow, I didn't.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then in that context, the weigh-in was this huge confirmation. Because that didn't have to happen. And so it was like validation of this theory that something's not mentally right with her. So you were also seeing things before the weigh-in.
Yeah, for sure. There are little things like, she might have just snapped at the weigh-ins and freaked out, and that carries over all the way through. Because when she walked out to the cage, it was a little girl wearing a Ronda Rousey mask.
Yeah, it was like she was impersonating herself.
Yeah, exactly. She wasn't living in the Ronda Rousey power, and all of that, you were seeing it. But there is that thing, and we've seen it before, and I've even experienced it, where I'm, at whatever stage, I think it was my 4th fight, and I'd already beaten this guy, and I choked him unconscious in like 2 minutes, and then they asked me to fight him again, and in Moncton, New Brunswick, and I was like, I don't need to fight this guy again. He's the only guy I beat. And they said, well, we'll put our belt on the line. I'm like, okay. I never thought that I would ever fight for a belt of any size or magnitude. So I was like, yeah, let's go do it. And I remember standing in the cage looking at him, and suddenly my brain said, I'm not amped up enough. Now I have felt too amped up and thought, how do I calm myself down, and been unsuccessful at that at times. So I've experienced on both ends, but I literally was like, I'm not stimulated enough. I'm not, aroused enough for a combat. And I started kind of yelling and bouncing up and down and got myself wound up. And she may have felt, I don't have what I need mentally here, for whatever reason, which would be a very unfamiliar place for her. So she may have just kind of sought to create something. Maybe I need to hate her. Maybe I need to want this more. She couldn't identify it, but she may have, to some degree, wanted to open some kind of door there. But when she opened it, she just got real emotional, and it backfired, because you can't leave these things to chance. You have to be working on that the whole way through. And one of the anchors of working on that true confidence is evidence, is truth, is how many great boxers did I cut off and I take down? How many amazing footwork southpaws who were standing in there with me did I catch? Shit, my stupid coach didn't set me up with any of that. I didn't when they brought boxers in, I boxed with them. Like, I didn't take them down. Maybe I'm not prepared. Any of that is going on, and now we got a problem. And especially when you're somebody who's winning, yes, with great throws, and yes, with incredible, arm bars and improving skills, but also winning with confidence and mental strength. If that thing is cracked in there, we could see it. And this was said not only by me, but by some of the other guys who were watching it here at Fight Network. And everyone's like, she doesn't look right when she walked out. She wasn't right.
Right.
And none of this in any way. And people often say, when they'll hear a conversation like this, because this is not, there's not meaning to be taken from these observations. In no way are we saying that doesn't mean that Holly Holm is brilliant or had the perfect game plan or whatever. We're just looking at some of these truths. And even if she did everything right and was at her best, which she may be next time, Holly Holm still very well might beat her. The things that are there, at least technically, cannot be fixed in 4 months while you're making 2 movies. They cannot. So what all of this was shown, which undermined her confidence, but in no way does that mean that Holly Holm won't win it again and wouldn't win it every time if Holly's at her best, which she was.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I've been taking that for granted, but but you're right. I guess this conversation could be seen as somehow taking something away from Holly Holm. I see it as almost the opposite. I see it as causal, that Holly Holm, being who she is, technically, but also mentally, is part of what caused Ronda, who's smart, to sense the closer she got, I don't have this. My tools might not be good enough. And that it's not that Ronda coincidentally was different mentally. It's that the closer she got to facing what she was facing, she realized this is a challenge.
Yeah.
And then Holly Holm,
maybe I'm not even as prepared as I was against Betch Correa, maybe I'm not even as good a shape. Maybe there's some concern. Maybe she's, not been training properly. If there's anything, if she's doing anything less than she's ever done, she needs to be working twice as hard because of the understanding of what this is. But yeah, you're right. Causal is how I look at it too. It's not a coincidence that everybody Conor McGregor has fought has said, yeah, I wasn't at my best. Is that a mathematical coincidence? In most cases, they'll say he got into my head, and Poirier said it, Branda said it, most of them have said it. Johnson just fought Diaz. Diaz looked amazing, but Johnson said, yeah, man, the guy got in my head. I let him do that. And you do let him. You have the choice. You have the control over it being irrelevant. We've seen plenty of people fight, people of that nature and be able to find ways to make it irrelevant. It's up to you, but you have to be strong enough to be able to do it.
Well, we saw Condit do it against the older Diaz. Yeah,
exactly.
Who tried to draw him in, and Condit maybe got drawn into, exchanging at boxing distance a couple moments here or there, but always went back to the game plan, which, some people didn't love, but I thought that was part of what was brilliant.
I think it's brilliant.
Big sister is a great term. I've heard you use it before. What Holly Holm did to Ronda, it wasn't just that Ronda was sensing that Holly's a bigger challenge, and this is maybe, I don't feel as ready as I used to, but man, like Holly Holm just didn't waver.
And she physically even won the little physical exchange. One was throwing a tantrum, and the other one was just, and they knew it too. Like if we knew it enough to, to be saying it's real and it's in play, Holly and her quality high-level coaches that she's had a lifetime with are saying, look, we're winning this fight. This is going to make us even more confident in what we're doing, even more stable. We're going to be even less emotional, and we're going to win this fight.
Yep, I totally agree. And I think there's maybe even one more level to it, which is, Ronda is smart despite, having trouble with this last fight. And so I didn't even take it as like, because of I didn't only take it that Ronda's sort of mental, not looking as good as she normally did as like evidence that maybe this fight won't go as well. But I took it as, I don't know what the right word is, like cognitive, or basically another expert in MMA, basically showing that she thinks this could be a problem. That Ronda's brain was telling her, I don't like this matchup. To me, that was just more evidence that, all right, Ronda's seeing kind of what we're seeing, what you're seeing.
For sure. And, as this stuff relates to the book, next time we get together, we'll have to go back to figuring out how to, this fight and Conor, both of those are things where we can go in, lay it out in a way, and then go back and examine some of the mental principles that were at play. There's no doubt these two have to be in the book. They absolutely have to. Holly Holmes, not only, and again, we'll have to find the right way to really get this across. But first of all, Holly Holmes' brilliant preparation, mental preparation, game planning, all the things that she did right, that they not only, when you do them right, when you get everything together, when you build that real confidence, you build that ability to go in and work, you do it because it's the right thing to do and it's going to make you perform at your best. You don't do it with any belief that it will undermine the confidence of the other. That's a bonus if it happens.
Right.
That is a bonus. So Holly Holm came in to make herself perform at the best, in the best way possible, the best idea, best plan, the best strategy, the best emotional, arousal, and in her case, not a lot of it. All of that. The goal was to perform at your best because you can win. And that is what we all saw, and that's why we thought she might win. But when you get the added bonus of all of your preparation being read by the other person, being intimidating the other person and undermining their confidence, that's when you know. And Holly knew it, we knew it, her coaches knew it, and you could see it. She's at her best, and that's enough to win. But if she can make her not at her best, it's enough to feel very comfortable that she's going to win. And I think it was that. And I think that's the thing to look at in the book, is everything Holly did was done for her own sake.
Right.
It was not done to undermine or in any way damage Ronda. But that fucking bonus, we'll take that every single time. And I think Conor views it the same way. Yeah, he'll want to go in and go like this to Poirier's face at the last second. Yeah, he'll want to get physical and do all that. But that is to build up his ability to perform. If it undermines you, that's an added bonus. But we cannot count on that. We cannot count on that. Because if we're counting on it and it doesn't happen, that's not good. We have to do it entirely to make ourselves perform at our best And hey, man, we'll take the bonus if it makes them perform less than perfect.
Yeah, now that makes sense, and it's funny. I wouldn't have immediately realized that about Conor till hearing you make it explicit. But because he does more overt behaviors that seem like they're all about messing with the other person. But you're 100% right. I can see that Conor does not need for it to work. It's a bonus.
Yeah.
He's completely content at being ready himself, being laser focused, oozing confidence, visualizing it, and then making it happen.
Yeah, he it makes him perform better. And I've told the story a few times, and thank you for mentioning that interview I did with him, because I really liked it, and it was really, I like every interaction I've had with him. I love breaking down the guy's work. I spoke with him after. I asked him some things at the press conference, and I feel like between my understanding of movement and my understanding of these mental things and my sort of curiosity and in these areas and my study, that I think I'm understanding him and what he's doing better than most of the rest of the world. And so I want to get to a point where I'll do a long hour or 2-hour interview with him about some of these principles, but connecting movement to confidence. That's where I think the interesting thing is happening. But when I did speak to him, that real visualization that he was doing, where you could see him, he was starting to, like, it wasn't just give me an answer, he was seeing it. I think I started to visualize it. My hand started to shake, and I saw him glance down at it a few times, and I wasn't intimidated, or there was just something really powerful. And I think I'm more sensitive to that than most would be, because of the types of research that we do, and the types of the last few years of interest in these areas and study of these areas. But it was strange. I felt a physiological response to his confidence and his visualizing, and I think I started visualizing it. I think I could see Aldo in the cage. I'm talking to him, but all of a sudden it was very strange. It was very, very wild, and I'm glad I had that experience, because it tells me those things are real. But so I talked to Mullins about it, who works with Kavanaugh and their team. I think he has worked with Conor, but I don't think they do directly, although I could be wrong. He might just not be telling me, because those things are confidential between these people.
Sure,
but he said, you're not the first one who's had that kind of response. He said there was a guy at Cage Warriors, and at the stare downs, they stared down, and Conor did what he does, and the guy started to cry. Like, he fucking started to cry. So it's not like I had some kind of weird thing that's unknown. Poirier talked about it. All the guys that have been in there, Aldo felt it. You could see him feel it, and he has developed that reality, his perspective, his focus, his confidence, his ability to visualize. All of that is so hyper developed that you feel it. And I'm glad I felt it, because now I can relate to how these fighters feel it. It must be really fucking hard to spend a few months like Aldo did around him. All of that psychological work was all laid out there. I think Aldo did a smart thing by pulling out, whether he was injured and too injured to fight or whatever the first time, because it distanced himself a little bit from all of that warfare that was going on. And Conor laid down a lot of work, and that left hand was there. It landed for a lot of reasons, but including the fact that Aldo was setting up that right hand to left hook in such a way, like, it's kill or be killed, because I don't want to be here for 25 minutes. This is such a stressful environment. I got to get that guy out of there. And McGregor knew that was going to happen. He made that happen.
Yeah, and this is a lot of people I'm seeing a lot of McGregor quotes come across, my social media recently, and there's one recently about how it's not talent, it's obsession, and there was another one about how if you just visualize it, you make it happen. And I have mixed reactions to some of these things and how people are interpreting them.
Yeah.
Because when I watched your interview with Conor, I felt it viscerally. Like, it was incredible. And I shared it with some psychology friends, not just the MMA world, because I'm like, you've got to see this. Like, this is a psychological state which we don't get to see very often. And so I get all that, and I think he's at the next level. I think he's going to transform stuff. But at the same time, I don't want people to make this into magic. So when people say things like, it's just because he visualized it so strongly, he made it happen. Well, he didn't visualize taking him down and submitting him. He didn't visualize just wading in with punches. He visualized a certain kind of outcome that fit McGregor's style, that fit how he matched up with Aldo, that fit with McGregor's whole approach to martial arts and striking. Like, so it's not that you can just visualize anything and make it happen. And also, McGregor part of his talent is that he can get obsessed and that he's really smart. But part of his talent is that he has long limbs, for at least for featherweight. And that helps. So it's not that mental can do everything, but mental can do amazing things. But you do combine them in practical, not magical ways, practical ways to make things happen. And I guess I'm realizing part of what I hope we can do eventually, short term, long term, is keep some of the stuff from getting too magical, because it is amazing.
I don't see any of it as magical or mystical or some kind of thing, because it's one thing, and this will be something maybe we'll seek to do with the book, is by the time a guy is staring into another guy's eyes and it makes him cry from pressure, it does seem like, something that he's got that other people don't have. But he wasn't born with that. He didn't have it at 20, and he didn't have it it's all work. And that's what he's getting at, I think, with it's not talent, it's obsession. And that's what I find very fascinating is he will give insight for it. And this is another reason I'd like to have a long conversation with him and get deeper into this. He will gladly say, I work on this thing. This is the guy we do it with. Look what we do. I work on my mind. I do it this way. He'll talk about those. If other people want to see them, they're there to be taken. And very early on, Ramdeen asked him, he said, if you have something new, if you have something, how important is it to keep it in your back pocket? And if you have a technique, and save it. And he goes, no, if you got a technique, you show it immediately. It forces you to innovate. He doesn't want to be the guy who's secretive and has something and only he knows it. He wants everybody to learn it. It'll force him to innovate even further. And by being forced to innovate is how you get to these levels. You work, and you make little improvements that help everything. So one improvement, you can get a little better at throwing a punch. But if you got a little better at learning in training, that would help everything. And you got a little better at understanding how to focus, really focus your mind, everything gets better. If you get a little bit better at really developing true confidence, everything gets better. So he makes small improvements. And I talked to Condit about this. Condit's like, it's very hard for Condit or anybody at his level to improve his boxing 0.5%. It'll take 5 years if it improves at all. And you may not be able to track it because you can't see it. But if you could improve how you recover, or if you could improve what you accomplish when you sleep, or if you could improve your ability to focus, if you can learn better, these tiny improvements of things that help everything really elevate you. That's something McGregor does, and he talks openly about it. He wants other people doing it. I don't know if this is a off-tangent thing, but McGregor will get a lot of credit, and 99% of the credit for these big changes. But Condit's been doing a lot of these things for 5, 7, 9 years. He's been developing along these lines for that long too. But it's going to be fascinating. We're going to need to work very hard to stay on track with the changes that McGregor makes in how he trains and how he learns and those mental things that he does, because he is still growing exponentially. So we're going to have to really track it.
Yeah, it's crazy how much evolution's happening. It's happening naturally, and then it's happening because certain people like McGregor are inspiring it to happen and making sure it happens.
That's true in other things. I mean, technology, the way technology evolves is kind of the way that we're seeing fighting evolve right now. People who are still going, oh, well, you got to wrestle this way, or how's your jiu-jitsu, are missing the point. You've got to get all that stuff up and then evolve it on a technological level. And that's hard to get into. I don't think I've quite got a handle on what's happening with that yet, but it is happening. And, we'll just need some real study in the first quarter of 2016 to really be able to understand it. But there'll be people making giant leaps as they learn how to do that. And it won't be because you're better at hitting a switch, or your sprawl got stronger, or you tightened up your left hook. It's going to be much larger across the board improvements based on mentality.
Yeah. It's one thing I'm getting from what you're saying is how much of Conor's fighting style is tied up to his mental approach. It seems like they're almost more intimately tied than with other fighters. It's not just here's what he wants to do, and when he's mentally right, he can do it better. It's that they inform each other.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is, from a lot of people, Their mind is their limiting factor. You've got all these super athletes who are amazing in the gym, and whatever amount they can get out of their ability to perform from their mind might get them to 80%, 85, 90% to that top level of their ability to perform under pressure. McGregor's mind developed so far along, his ability to perform at a high level performed so far along that his limitations were in his body, I think. That's why he wanted to open it up with a movement coach, is when you're in a flow state and you're literally free to express yourself and paint a picture with your body, and your body limits you. We need to open that up. And as we open that up, you get freer with your ability to express yourself mentally. And those things inform each other, push and pull, push and pull. If he's now so free with his body, he's going to have to seek even larger ways to maximize his mental potential, and then larger ways to maximize his physical potential.
That's the role of that funky movement training we saw as part of his open workout, where his coach was sort of using that stick. It was just, he wanted to put himself in more situations where he had to both do movements which he hasn't maybe done before, and just open himself up so his body can just move in all sorts of new ways, and that will be one of the small ingredients that helps him translate into a more evolved fighter.
Yeah, and you think there's so many connections. We could, and maybe we will, do a chapter just on how he connects the confidence and his movement. But when you are certain that your left hand will knock somebody out, you commit to it a lot different than if you hope it will, And he's been doing that part for years. And it's like he's got so much power, he can be confident in it. But because he's so confident in it, he can throw it with maximum commitment. He's also been hit with that right hand that I mentioned in the breakdown and I asked him about. Well, it never hurt him. He never felt hurt. He never felt stopped or limited by it. So sometimes that true commitment to that straight left of his comes with, I'm going to get hit too. But that's okay. Nobody's hurt me. And because I can take it, and I'm confident that I can take it. Cormier talked a little bit about going in to fight Anthony Johnson, that taking a punch and your chin has some connection to your confidence and your belief in yourself and ability to take something on the chin. And I think that's true to the point where something just shuts you off, and then that day, that belief will change. If you knew there was no way this guy could knock you out and you got knocked out, Ronda's dealing with that right now. Ronda's dealing with that truth right now. So there's a lot of things going on. I wish we could chat all day. But I've got Jeff. So I do my breakdowns with Jeff and James here. They're both so good. And I'm working on a Condit breakdown. Now, it is Saturday afternoon, and we're doing the live show at 7. And it's been very hard to really look at this one. There's so many variables. I feel confident Condit can certainly win this fight. He can win it by decision. He can find a way to finish Lawler. But Lawler has kept improving physically, technically, mentally himself. After beating Hendricks, you wondered if that was, well, finally I got the title, Matt Hughes put it around me, I've done it. But he created new goals for himself and new limits to reach, and you saw it in Rory's fight, and he's going to do it again. So it's very hard to pick a winner in this one. Condit, mentally unbelievable too. The one interesting thing, I think Lawler is very, in very complicated ways, but he's a bludgeoner. He's linear, hooks and straight lines, and maybe the odd uppercut and kicks. And Condit is a slasher. Punches are coming on weird angles. And so it's almost like maces and hammers versus swords and slicing weapons. I think that is going to be super neat to see. Condit can create hard angles, but you watch Lawler's feet, and it just makes these small adjustments to kind of nullify your angles. So it's a hard one to pick. I feel like Condit can win the fight, but I would tell people not to put money on this fight. There's just so many variants.
I want to bring us full circle to what we started this conversation with. Maybe it's a good way to end. You talked about people ask you for predictions, and sometimes you have them when the data tell you that there's a clear favorite, and sometimes you don't. And I think it's one of the things I've really appreciated. That's really drawn me to your analysis. Is it is very we're never certain. Sometimes we're close to certain, but we're never certain. And you are honest about what the data show you. So you can say, I'm fairly sure that this is going to happen, or it looks like this is what's going to happen. We can do experiments that can help increase our certainty. But a lot of times, the most honest and the most scientific thing to say is, I don't know. We just don't know. There's reasons to believe multiple options. And so, yeah, I can really appreciate that, when it comes to this fight with Lawler and Condit. Lawler, to some eyes, is just like, well, he just kind of stands in boxes, but I don't know that we've seen a fighter like Lawler who's had this much cage experience, and yet is this many years later fighting at this high level. Like you're saying, the micro adjustments he makes without even thinking about it, he's so flowy. His body and brain just do the right things in the right moments, as if he's done it so a million times before, which he has. Condit, you've talked about Condit some of the same way. He has this ability to flow and make adjustments at the level of a fifth of a second. He'll start an elbow but change it to a spinning back fist when it's the right thing to do. And these guys are going against each other. Yeah,
that's why it's so great. But I think a lot of times analysis is something I love doing my job. I just love doing it. And my belief is that you could go and just try to find big sweeping statements and make grand statements all the time. There are people who do that in media, whether it's analysis or other things, to get clicks and to get people to buzz things around. But I think in the long run, if you're on a constant state of learning, the truth is you got to take the scientific approach to it. And sometimes more information just gives you more questions, and there's not enough time to answer them. And many of them require seeing the fight to happen, which makes a prediction impossible. But it is, there's a lot of really good analysis going on now. I'm really happy about that. I'm happy. I feel like I've, in whatever small way, sort of tried to push that movement a little bit and get people doing that. And there are lots now. There's hundreds and hundreds of people on Twitter who say, they're analyzing things, but that's a long road. And anybody who is saying, anybody who's 25 years old and has never fought and is telling you authoritatively what this means and how it's going to happen, it's kind of BSing. And it's okay to BS. It's okay to stimulate conversation. It's okay to, but analysis gets more and more complex. It doesn't get easier and easier the more you know. It gets harder and harder. And I think that truth has to be there. And if you speak with that kind of truth, people will be interested to see the further generation of where we're going to analyze this stuff. I think they'll want to come along for the ride. But if you start acting like you know everything, you're lying, because you just haven't learned enough to know what you don't know and know how little you know. You got to learn enough to know how little you know. And that is the beautiful thing and the kind of intimidating thing about learning more and more about martial arts. And we're doing that with the mental aspects now. Everything we unpack and look, oh my God, there's 27 new questions. But this will keep us busy until we are too old to watch fights on TV, because it's never going to be completed. And once you become a purple belt in analysis, you realize it's 10 more years till you're a black belt. And when you're a black belt, that's like becoming a white belt again. So it's just part of the
more you know, the more you realize how vast of stuff to know, that you'll never get there, but boy, is it fun to keep getting better.
Yeah. Thanks, man. It's been a slice.